You didn't cancel your plans because you were tired. You canceled them because some part of you was relieved to have an excuse. Go ahead, sit with that for a second, because this video is not going to let you off the hook. Not today, not with the soft, therapeutic language you've been trained to reach for every time you feel resistance. I'm burned out. I need rest. I'm not in the right headspace. You build a whole vocabulary around your avoidance, and you wear it like armor, and nobody questions it because we've all agreed, culturally, collectively, to accept exhaustion as the ultimate alibi. But here's what Friedrich Nietzsche would say to you if he could reach through this screen. You are not tired. You are weak. And the worst part, you prefer it that way. That's not an insult. It's a diagnosis. And Nietzsche was the greatest diagnostician in the history of Western thought, not because he hated humanity, but because he loved what humanity could become and was disgusted by what it had chosen to remain. Look at your life, not the story you tell about your life, the actual life, the project you've been about to start for 3 years, the body you keep saying you'll earn back once things settle down, the relationship you know is slowly rotting but feel too exhausted to confront, the creative work you do for 20 minutes and then abandon because you're not feeling it. Are you tired or are you afraid? Because those are two very different things, and you have been confusing them your entire adult life. Real fatigue is biological. It's the body's debt after genuine expenditure. But what most people call tiredness, it's psychological. It's the friction of resistance, the discomfort that arrives the moment you face something that demands more from you than you currently believe you can give. And the moment that friction shows up, you have been conditioned by therapy culture, by wellness Instagram, by hustle culture's hangover, to interpret it as a signal to stop. Nietzsche interpreted it as the signal to begin. Here's the thing about Nietzsche that nobody tells you in the comfortable summary version. He was sick. Genuinely, biologically, brutally sick. Crippling migraines that left him bedridden for days. Near blindness. Nausea that made him vomit through long stretches of his writing years. He lived in cheap rented rooms. He had almost no friends. He was rejected by the woman he loved. He watched the work that defined him get misunderstood, ignored, and ridiculed for his entire conscious life. And he wrote. He wrote relentlessly. He produced some of the most electrifying philosophy ever committed to paper, not in spite of his suffering, but through it. Because of it, shaped by the decision he made again and again to refuse the seduction of collapse. He was not lucky. He was not gifted with ease. He was a man who understood something that you have been carefully protected from understanding. Suffering is not the opposite of strength. It is the material strength is made from. And this is where it starts to sting. Because the culture you were raised inside taught you to see discomfort as a malfunction. Something went wrong. Rest. Recover, return to baseline. But Nietzsche's entire philosophical project was an assault on that baseline, that comfortable, mediocre, herd-approved state of just enough living that passes for a human existence. He called it the last man, and he meant it as the most devastating insult in his philosophical arsenal. The last man blinks. The last man invented happiness. The last man is comfortable. The last man is you, if you let yourself stay exactly where you are. So before we go any further, before we enter Nietzsche's mind and really let him operate on you, I need you to make a decision right now. Are you watching this to feel understood, or are you watching this to be changed? Because if it's the first one, close the tab. There are 100 other videos that will nod along with your fatigue and send you off with your avoidance intact. But if it's the second one, if some small, almost suffocated part of you suspects that you are capable of more than you have allowed yourself to become, then stay, because what comes next is going to be uncomfortable. That's the point. To understand Nietzsche, you have to understand what he was against, because his philosophy was not a self-help system. It was a declaration of war. War against what? Against the values that Western civilization had quietly, invisibly installed inside you without your consent. He called this project the genealogy of morals. And the central insight is one of the most dangerous ideas ever written down, that the values you believe are good, humility, self-sacrifice, pity, meekness, are not eternal truths. They are the weapons of the defeated. Let that land. Nietzsche traced the history of morality and found something that made the respectable philosophers of his time want to look away. He found that what we call morality was not handed down from heaven. It was invented. Specifically, it was invented by people who were losing. He called this the Slave Revolt in morality. When the weak cannot overcome the strong through power, they do something more insidious. They redefine the game. They declare that strength is arrogance, that ambition is greed, that excellence is oppression, that wanting more than the average is something to be ashamed of. And here's the genius and the horror of it. It worked. The values of weakness became the dominant moral code of civilization. Nietzsche called this ressentiment, a French word he borrowed because no German word was vicious enough to capture it. Ressentiment is not simple resentment. It is the psychological process by which the powerless transform their inability to act into a moral virtue. It is the alchemy that turns I cannot into I shall not, and then most dangerously into you should not. Do you see it now? Look at the language around weakness in modern life. You don't hear, I gave up. You hear, I chose my mental health. You don't hear, I'm afraid of failure. You hear, I'm not in a season of striving right now. You don't hear, I lack the discipline. You hear, I'm learning to be gentle with myself. None of these things are inherently wrong. Rest is real. Gentleness has its place, but Nietzsche's diagnosis cuts deeper. When the language of self-compassion becomes a permanent residence rather than a temporary shelter, it is no longer healing, it is hiding. And the culture not only permits the hiding, it celebrates it. It gives you likes and supportive comments and the warm embrace of people who are also hiding, who are also relieved that you're not going to make them feel bad by trying too hard. Because nothing threatens the herd more than someone who refuses to stay in it. Now here comes his most famous concept, the one that gets misquoted and misunderstood almost universally, the will to power. People hear power and think domination, politics, violence, control over other people. That is not what Nietzsche meant, not even close. The will to power is the fundamental drive toward self-overcoming. It is the force that pushes life to exceed itself, the instinct present in every living thing to become more than it currently is. A tree's roots breaking through rock to find water, a musician playing until their fingers bleed because the piece is not yet right, a thinker who cannot stop following a thought even when it leads somewhere terrifying. This is the will to power. It is not about defeating others. It is about refusing to be defeated by yourself. And this is where your fatigue enters the frame. When you feel that resistance, that heaviness before the hard thing, what Nietzsche is asking you to interrogate is this. Is this resistance a message from your body, or is it your will to power being suppressed by your fear? Because the will to power can be blocked. It can be trained out of you. And when it is blocked, when you consistently choose the comfortable retreat over the demanding ascent, it does not disappear. It curdles. It turns inward. And what you experience as depression, numbness, chronic low-grade misery, and yes, exhaustion, is often not the result of having done too much. It is the result of having demanded too little of yourself for too long. This is Nietzsche's clinical finding. We do not tire from effort. We tire from suppression. The energy you are calling fatigue, it is often the energy of everything you have not done, piling up, pressing down, becoming a weight that feels indistinguishable from the aftermath of exertion. And his prescription was not rest. It was not a spa day or a digital detox. It was the revaluation of your values, a complete audit of what you are calling virtues, and the courage to ask which of them are genuine goods, and which of them are simply comfortable stories that allow you to remain exactly where you are. The most dangerous question Nietzsche ever wrote was not a complicated philosophical puzzle. It was 4 words. What are you becoming? Not what are you thinking about becoming. Not what did you used to want to become. Not what does the culture tell you is a reasonable thing to become. What are you right now in the actual choices of your actual life becoming? Answer that honestly. Then we can continue. This is the part they left out of your philosophy class, because it was too much, too dark, too honest about something that comfortable institutions cannot afford to say out loud. Nietzsche had a concept he called the Übermensch, the overman, and it has been butchered, weaponized, stolen, and misunderstood so thoroughly that most people approach it with preloaded disgust. The Nazis tried to claim it. Hollywood made it a power fantasy. Academics sanitized it into abstraction. But here is what the overman actually is, stripped of every distortion. The overman is the person who creates their own values. That's it. That's the terrifying heart of it. Not someone who is genetically superior, not someone who rules over others, but someone who has done the almost impossible work of looking at the values they inherited from their parents, their culture, their religion, their social class, and has said, I am going to decide for myself what is worth living for. And the reason society finds this idea threatening, genuinely threatening, not intellectually interesting, but emotionally destabilizing, is that if the overman is possible, then your excuses are not moral positions. They are choices, and you are responsible for them. Here is the idea that Nietzsche built his late philosophy around, the one that most people genuinely cannot sit with, amor fati. Love of fate, not acceptance of fate, not making peace with fate, not grudging tolerance of fate. Love. He was asking something extraordinary. He was asking you to look at everything that has happened to you, the losses, the humiliations, the failures, the betrayals, the pain you did not deserve, and the pain you brought entirely on yourself, and not merely endure it, not merely survive it, but to want it, to see it as the necessary material out of which the only life you could have lived was built. My formula for greatness in a human being, he wrote in Ecce Homo, is amor fati, that one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backward, not in all eternity. Sit with how radical that is. Not things happened, but I've moved on. Not the pain made me stronger, I suppose, but I would choose this, all of it, because it is mine, because it made me, because the self I am building is only possible through this exact sequence of fire. Now apply this to your exhaustion. Apply this to the thing you keep calling tiredness. Amor fati does not say rest is wrong. It says avoidance is a form of self-betrayal. It says that if you use your suffering as a reason to stop growing, you have not honored the suffering. You have let it win. You have allowed the pain to become your ceiling rather than your foundation. And then there is his most terrifying thought experiment of all, the eternal recurrence. Nietzsche did not necessarily believe this was literally true. He used it as a hammer. Imagine, he said, that you will live this exact life, every moment of it, every choice, every hour, infinite times. Not once, not 1,000 times, infinitely. The same joys, the same griefs, the same Tuesday afternoons, the same moment you are in right now, forever. Does that thought crush you, or does it clarify you? Because if the thought of living your life again and again fills you with horror, if the idea makes you want to protest, to say no, not this, anything but this, then Nietzsche is asking you the most important question of your existence. Why are you living a life you would not choose twice? This is not rhetorical. This is surgical. The person who understands eternal recurrence does not use it as a reason to despair. They use it as a filter. Before every significant choice, every act of avoidance, every capitulation to comfort, every moment of choosing the smaller, safer, quieter version of what is possible, they ask, would I choose this again? Would I choose this infinitely? Most of what you call tiredness would not survive that question. Most of the retreats, the postponements, the not right now, maybe later, they dissolve under the eternal weight of that question. Because you cannot say, I was too tired, infinitely. At some point, and Nietzsche is demanding it be this point, this moment, you have to reckon with the truth that you are spending an irreplaceable life in ways you would not defend if you saw them clearly. The deeper cut is this. Nietzsche is not asking you to be superhuman. He is asking you to stop performing humanity as if mediocrity were its natural state. He believed, against all comfortable evidence, that there is something in you that is capable of more than you have shown. Not more money, not more status, more aliveness, more genuine contact with what it means to be conscious and mortal and capable of creation. And the obstacle between you and that aliveness is not your circumstances. It is the story you have chosen to tell about your limits. Now we turn Nietzsche into a toolkit, not soft suggestions, real uncomfortable Nietzsche-derived strategies that will work precisely because they refuse to flatter you. Weapon 1, the Ressentiment audit. Nietzsche identified resentment as the disease of people who have given up on direct action and turned their helplessness into a moral system. Here is how you find it in your own life. Take the things you criticize most passionately in other people, the colleagues who are too ambitious, the friends who are obsessed with success, the public figures who have no work-life balance. Now ask yourself one brutal question. Am I criticizing what I secretly want but have convinced myself I cannot have? This is the Ressentiment audit. It is not comfortable, because what you will often find is that the values you perform most publicly, the contempt for hustle, the celebration of doing less, the moral language around rest, are not genuine philosophical positions. They are defenses against disappointment. If striving is morally suspect, then not striving requires no explanation. Stop calling your retreat a value. Call it what it is. Then decide, with full honesty, what you actually want, and whether the life you're living is moving toward it or away from it. Weapon 2, the will to power practice. Remember, the will to power is not about others. It is about self-overcoming. So the practice is this. Every day identify the one thing that your current self most wants to avoid. Not because it is dangerous, not because it is wrong, but because it creates the friction of growth. Do that thing first. Before anything that feels good, before anything that confirms you are already adequate, do the thing that tells you that you are becoming something more than you currently are. This is not productivity advice. This is Nietzsche's method translated into daily life. Every day that you choose growth over comfort, however small, you are exercising the will to power. Every day that you choose comfort over growth, you are suppressing it, and suppression accumulates. What you call chronic fatigue is often the weight of weeks, months, years of suppressed will to power pressing down on you. Weapon 3, amor fati as an active practice. Most people passive-aggressively accept the past while secretly resenting it. It is what it is not amor fati. It is barely tolerance. Amor fati practiced actively looks like this. Take the hardest thing that has happened to you, the failure, the rejection, the loss, and spend 15 minutes writing in full seriousness the argument for why that thing was necessary. Not coincidentally educational. Necessary. Make the case, as if your life depended on it, that without that wound you would not have the particular edge, the particular clarity, the particular depth you carry now. This is not self-deception. It is not toxic positivity. It is the deliberate act of claiming your history rather than being owned by it. And once you claim it, once you genuinely own your past as the only possible foundation for this particular self, the exhaustion that comes from carrying grievance begins to lift. Not all of it, but enough that you can move. Weapon 4, the Eternal Recurrence filter. Apply this to decisions not philosophically but practically. Before you cancel something, avoid something, retreat from something, ask, if I were going to make this choice infinitely, would I? Would you choose infinite avoidance of the creative work that matters to you? Would you choose infinite retreat from the relationship conversation that needs to happen? Would you choose an infinite version of today The emails, the scrolling, the vague plans, the maybe later. If the answer is no, then you have your answer about right now. The Eternal Recurrence filter removes the comfort of I'll do it eventually. Eventually does not exist in a loop. There is only now and what you choose to do with it infinitely. Weapon 5. Revalue your exhaustion. This is the most practical and the most destabilizing weapon in the Nietzschean arsenal. Tonight, or right now if you're brave enough, sit down with your fatigue and interrogate it. Not to dismiss it, not to push through it recklessly, but to disaggregate it. Which parts are biological, which parts are genuine depletion from genuine effort, and which parts, be honest, be merciless, are the tiredness of resistance, the heaviness of proximity to something hard. Because biological fatigue requires rest, but resistance fatigue requires action. They feel almost identical. They require opposite responses. And you have been applying rest to resistance for years, and wondering why you never feel better. The person who can tell the difference between these two, who can look at their tiredness and accurately diagnose its source, has access to a form of self-knowledge that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. That is the weapon. That is the real one. The ability to look at yourself clearly enough to know when you need to stop, and when stopping is just another word for giving up. If these words carved an echo within your void do not turn back, the descent has just begun. Click below, subscribe, and claim your reality. Here is the truth Nietzsche spent his entire philosophical life trying to force into the open, at the cost of his friendships, his sanity, and eventually his conscious mind. Most people do not live, they endure. They endure their weeks, they endure their jobs, they endure their relationships. They endure the gap between what they imagined for themselves and what they settled for. And they fill that gap with every form of distraction, numbing, and curated fatigue that the modern world has made available to them. And they call this exhaustion, and they are given language to dignify it. And nobody says what Nietzsche said, this is not a life. This is a slow rehearsal for a life you will never actually perform. The Übermensch was never meant to be a fantasy figure. It was a direction, north on a compass. The point was not to arrive. The point was to be oriented, to know which way the ascent goes, even if you are not climbing yet, even if you are resting, even if you are wounded, even if everything around you is pulling you toward the last man's comfortable blink. You feel tired because you are in proximity to the life you could be living and not living it. That proximity creates a tension that the body reads as exhaustion. But it is not exhaustion. It is longing that has been waiting so long it has learned to disguise itself as fatigue. Nietzsche did not promise you happiness. He specifically, deliberately rejected it. Happiness, he thought, was a small goal. The goal of the last man who wants nothing but warmth and safety and the absence of pain. What Nietzsche offered instead was something far more demanding and far more alive. Meaning forged through struggle. A self-authored existence that you would look back on, that you would choose to repeat eternally. Not because it was easy, but because it was yours. He wrote, in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, I tell you, one must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star. Do you have chaos in you? Good. That's not a malfunction. That's the raw material. What are you building with it? Because here is the final cut. The one that leaves no room to maneuver. You are not the victim of your fatigue. You are the author of it. Every choice you have made about what to spend your energy on and what to protect yourself from by pretending to have none has been a choice, an authorship, an act of becoming. And you are becoming something. Right now, you cannot pause this process. Every day that you wait, every week that you manage rather than build, every year that you survive rather than inhabit, you are still becoming something. The only question is whether you will choose what. Nietzsche had one more thing to say to you. He said it in the form of a question buried in the gay science. And it is the question this entire video has been building toward. A demon, he wrote, comes to you in your loneliest moment and tells you that this life, this exact life, you will live again and again infinitely. What would you do? Would you curse the demon, or would you look at your life and say, yes, again, exactly this, because I built this, because I chose this, because this is mine? That is the challenge. Not to be Nietzsche, not to be superhuman, but to be human enough, courageous enough, honest enough, alive enough, to build a life you could answer yes to. You are not tired. You are standing at the bottom of something worth climbing and calling your fear of the altitude by a softer name. Start climbing. Leave a comment below. What is the one thing you've been calling tiredness that might actually be resistance? Name it. Own it. That's the first step.